We believe that wealth is a journey, and that this is your jumpstart to trading success. Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Trader's Mindset Show, where we believe that wealth is a journey and that this is your jumpstart to trading success. I'm Mike.
I'm Melissa. Are you ready to revamp your mindset today, Mike?
Hell yeah, let's go.
I love it. Okay, so this is going to be a great show. If you are ready to revamp your mindset, not only are we going to talk about key ways that you can start developing a growth mindset today, but we're also going to be talking about money beliefs. We're bringing on Alan Chen, who graduated from your alma mater, Baruch College. He is a graduate from there, and he realized after graduating he didn't really have the financial education to really know how to properly invest his money. So he became somewhat of an armchair expert, where he did a lot of research and studying, and now he has his own blog. It is tamoonfund.com, and he is helping to educate other students at Baruch as well as graduates about how best that they could take their money and run with it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great interview. Really looking forward to talking to Alan.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. But before we get started, I was just reading one of the quotes that you share on Instagram.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, from Marty Schwartz, who was a trader. He wrote the book Pitbull, correct?
Yeah, Pitbull.
And the quote says, "A great trader is like a great athlete. You have to have natural skills, but you have to train yourself how to use them." And I thought it was interesting because what you said in the captions part was that you don't really agree with Marty on this quote, correct?
Yeah, no, I don't think that there's a certain innate ability. I think that there's certain skills that we need to develop in order to become successful traders, but I don't think that there's like some innate ability where person A can be a trader and person B just can't. It's not in their DNA to do it. I think that all the different skills that we talk about in the Mindshift guide, things like learning how to analyze markets, learning about position sizing, trade management, risk management, mindset, all these things those are things that can be studied and learned and are really achievable by anybody that's dedicated enough to put in the work.
No, I love it. It actually ties in perfectly with this book that I was reading by Carol S. Dweck. It's called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. And she actually goes into how you can really learn to fulfill your potential, that there's two different mindsets. There's the fixed mindset, which is more of that you are, more static. You're not open to growth, and you are, stuck in your habits, whether it's from your education, from your religion, your environment, those are what dictates your actions. And versus the growth mindset, where you are open to learning and that you don't believe that you have to have this natural talent to succeed in life, that you can continue to grow and to further your education to develop what you need to succeed. So I think it's going to be interesting for us to talk about how can we continue to develop more of that growth mindset. Because the truth is we have both. That there are those times where you have that fixed mindset where you think you're the expert, this is as far as I'm going to go. So you don't want to continue to learn and improve and to become innovative. That you kind of like fall back and you don't take those risks and those chances. What do you think, Mike, are some of the things that you have developed over the years to continue to further that growth mindset for yourself in your trading?
You actually just reminded me of philosophy class, like a philosophy like 101 or 102 class that I was taking at Baruch many moons ago. And one of my favorite philosophers was Socrates. Right? And one of his most famous quotes is that all that I know is that I know nothing, and therefore I'm the wisest man who ever lived. And it's not that he doesn't know anything, like he's just like bumping into walls, right? Like it's not that, but like the knowledge that what is knowledge? Like just the questioning everything, like whatever you think you know, continuing to question what you think that you know, questioning your own beliefs, and being completely open to other possibilities, and then questioning those too, to on this being on this quest for truth. I think that is what having
No, I love it because I think we always forget the mindset. Everybody keeps throwing this word out there, mindset. What is it? And I think that it is a frame of mind. It's like the sum of all your beliefs, all your opinions, all your thoughts that you've formed about the world and yourself. And when you think about how are you viewing your reality? What kind of lens are you putting on? We just watched this movie the other day, Inside Out from Pixar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I loved it. And we watched it with our daughter Lily. And it had like different emotions that are driving you and your actions. So it could be joy, it could be sadness, fear, anger, and how either they could work against each other or work siloed to form a different opinion or a reaction.
Yeah, I think that having an awareness of who is driving the car is important, and I think that that's an important first step. I think that most people, and I include myself in this boat. Back when I was new to trading and figuring out all this mindset stuff, just seemed so airy fairy at the time. It's like what emotions are driving, and having an awareness of when those emotions are in control and what outcome are they leading you to, or what are they trying to lead you either toward or protect you from. Right, I think that a common thought amongst traders on YouTube, Instagram, social media, wherever, is that you want to trade like a robot, and you're kind of like at war with yourself and at war with your emotions. I completely disagree. I think that coming to understand what's driving your emotions is important and can actually serve you. So sometimes it's important to be afraid, right? Like if you are, going to blindfold yourself and walk across a busy highway, like you should be afraid to do that, right? Like that doesn't sound like
not a good idea, no.
Right, and just how if you are a trader who is getting ready to throw their entire account into GameStop or AMC or whatever happens to be the flavor of the day, because you read somewhere that, hey, this is going up, there should be fear, right? There should be fear in doing that, because you might blow up your account.
I think that was the great thing about the movie, is that with joy, when it finally rewound to see where were those joyful moments, some of those that preceded it was sadness. And I think that was such a key element that you don't realize, that some of these emotions, that once you identify what it is, it could better serve you. And I think when it goes back to what you mentioned about awareness, having awareness of your beliefs, and it reminds me of this Napoleon Hill quote. He said, "There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge. Both poverty and riches are the offspring of thought." I think that's so wise, and it's so true that sometimes you just really need to see what type of mindset are you going to let take control of your, be in control. You want to be in control of those emotions and of those thoughts and those beliefs, so that you can make those decisions that are going to better serve you.
I think that if we are aware of if we understand what the emotion is, and we understand, why is it there? What is it? How is it helping me or not? Doing that kind of an exercise, then we can understand, is this rational or irrational? Is this leading me closer to or further away from what I want?
Yeah, do I want to have a mindset of scarcity or a mindset of abundance? A mindset of being fearful or being fearless? And you kind of have that choice of which one you're going to do. It's not going to happen overnight. I think if we have this fixed mindset of what we grew up with, some of those limiting beliefs are going to be maybe questioning us and saying, why are you taking this leap of faith? Why are you doing this? Are you good enough to do this? And being able to identify that and being able to still rise above it, and say okay, I'm going to take these steps and these measures to further have this growth mindset. If I want to look at life and say, there's not enough, if my initial thought was that there is not enough money to go around, but I want to change that and say that there is enough money for everybody. It was Stephen Covey, I think he had mentioned that in his book, that there is plenty to go around, that there's enough for everyone. It is built off of self-worth and generosity that's going to be able to say that, yes, that there's plenty of opportunity for everybody. So why am I being fearful or jealous of other people that might be getting more than I am at this moment? Kind of goes back to what you had mentioned earlier, where people come to you for trading advice and like they don't know how to trade, but it's like for them that they haven't taken those steps yet to understand where they are with their mindset goals.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. There were a couple of people that reached out to me on Instagram today via DM, and both people coincidentally had gone through one went through a boom and bust cycle, another one had just blew up an account and was like slamming his head against the wall, with very similar words about what he had said, but. Step one, is awareness that there is a problem, right? So congratulations to them, and if you understand that yes, there is a problem, and I'm aware of a problem, then great. That's what you want, and also often you need to have that kind of an emotion, where you can use an emotion of disgust, like I can't believe that this happened again, like just kind of like hitting that rock bottom, like that proverbial rock bottom where you might hear about that in like an AA kind of group, right? But like you hit rock bottom where this is just unacceptable, and I'm not going to live like this anymore. So from that point, you're able to transform that emotion into motivation to start to change, and then begin to do the work that's necessary to do it. If you're using it constructively, it's a great motivator. If you're using it destructively and you get caught in this thought pattern of I'm an idiot, right? Like if you just kind of search for why does this keep on happening? And then the voice that echoes back, well, because you're an idiot, right? That's something that can happen. So part of what we want to do, and this goes, it also kind of ties back into the first part where we were talking about Socrates, it's about questions. Questions are the answer. So we want to ask empowering questions. How can I use this to improve? What are some of the steps that I need to do in order to improve my situation? Where do I want to go? And how can I get there? Why is this important for me? Who's it going to affect? Who's going to benefit from me improving and growing my life, my fitness, my trading, whatever it is?
And how can you keep track of that? Through journaling, or is there a way that you're able to kind of set these,
what do you mean?
When these voices are coming in, you're an idiot, kind of understanding when you hear that voice. How can I combat? Because these things are habits. These are things that we have grown up with, that are instilled in our brains. How do we deconstruct? How do we start taking the path to fixing this?
Generating more awareness, right? So let's say you're in a trade, and throughout the course of the day, right? Some people will if you already have a journal, that's amazing. What most people journal is I'm entering here, I'm exiting there, and maybe they're writing something about I took this setup. Yeah, but what you also want to be journaling is your thoughts, your feelings, emotions, your energy levels. All those things are going to play a part into how you view the market. So let's say that we get into a fight. Right? Let's say that that would never happen.
Never happen, of course not.
But let's just say that in this parallel universe that we got into a fight.
Valentine's Day is this weekend, so he's being on his best behavior.
Yeah. Oh my God. So let's say that happens, and let's also say that it was a rough night. We're up all night, no sleep. Lilia is bouncing off the walls or whatever.
Our daughter.
So if I'm going to come into the market and just start to trade, and I don't have any kind of awareness of this, I know that I'm pissed off or tired or whatever, but I don't have an awareness of how that's going to view, like change the lens by which I view the market, then I'm likely going to not trade well.
And all the other areas of your life, like maybe you might get upset with Lily if she's like bouncing off the walls, or you might get upset about something else because it's still staying with you and you're not letting go of that emotion.
Right. And so
back to like, who's
maybe
driving the car?
Right.
Who's driving the car that day?
So who's driving the car? And you're in this example, I would be in a spot where I'm more likely to not trade well. But whatever the emotions are, whatever's going on, journal those things, and then add that to the journal, and along with the trade and what you executed. So that way you could start to see patterns over time. If you're just doing this once, maybe the market's rip roaring and I place a great trade and it goes to the moon. And then I think, wow, like I did this once. I was ticked off. Well, we had a fight. I was tired and I had the best trading day of my life. Maybe we should get into fights more often.
Right? Like, we do not recommend this.
Yeah, no, not at all. So, but what we do recommend then is doing this kind of journaling over time, being consistent with it, and then that's where you're going to start to see patterns. You're going to go through your journal, review it, and start to see like, oh, so like when I start to even like lean forward and like my posture is starting to suck energy out, or like like kind of when you're feeling hunched over, like you're in a different mood than like when you're sitting up straight, right? Like starting to write down these kinds of things, just however you catch them, and then you'll start to see patterns form in your trading. Like, well, what tends to lead to losses? Well, what was my mindset then? What was I thinking on this kind of a trade that was? And don't just do it from a losing perspective too, like to try to eliminate losses. We want to try to model success. So what were some of my best trades, and what was my mindset then? What were my habits? What were my routines? What did I eat for breakfast that day? What was my pre-morning prep? Well, what was my routine? Did I go for a walk? Did I meditate? Did I drink water? Well, whatever it is.
And I think that's something that's important, is that I think for anything, whether it's weight loss, trying to change a habit, or trying to do these journaling and think that, oh, finally things are becoming consistent. I got it. I'm done. Like, I don't need to continue to grow. I don't need to continue to practice what I did in order to get where I am. That's where you fall off the wagon, basically, where you then end up back to where you started. So I think that's important to realize that this is you're going to continue to grow. There will be setbacks, but it's something that you're going to continue to work towards.
Yes, wealth is a journey.
I love it. Well, we're going to be talking about money beliefs right after this word from our sponsor, when we have our guest Alan Chen on from Baruch. We can't wait to have him, and we're going to dive into that in just a moment.
Awesome. Today's episode is sponsored by the Mara Mindshift Guide, a trading beliefs workbook. Trading is a mental game. This workbook combines 20 years of trading experience with simple, easy to follow exercises to help you manage your mindset and move past limiting beliefs. Get your copy of the Mara Mindshift Guide today on Amazon or at marawealth.com/mindshift. Welcome back, everybody, to the Traders Mind Chat show. We are thrilled to welcome Alan Chen with us here on the show. Brief intro for Alan. Alan is a fellow Baruch alumni. He graduated from Baruch in 2017. He set out to improve his financial literacy after landing a full-time job after graduation, became somewhat of an armchair expert from everything from Roth IRAs to mutual funds, and he wanted to share his knowledge in a blog that he created called twomoonfund.com. And we'll include that down in the description and in the show notes too. Now he's hosting free seminars and webinars for Baruch students and recent grads. He hopes his blog and workshops will help fill the financial literacy knowledge gap he believes to be prevalent in the U.S. education. And frankly, so do I. So I'm really grateful to have Alan on the show with us, and can't wait to get into it. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
Alan's going to hold up the beautiful article that was in the Baruch Alumni Magazine. So just wanted to share that. That's how we first got to know you, and what a beautiful article that was written about you.
Amazing.
Big shout out to Greg for writing the article.
Absolutely. So tell us more about what sparked your journey towards this towards financial education. I know that we learned a little bit about it in the article, but can you tell us more about what sparked this journey?
Of course. Let's take a deep dive into my life. I am a child of immigrants, right? So I was born here, and they come from a low-income background, immigrating from China with really nothing on them. Similar to a lot of immigrant stories, actually. And coming here from a low-income immigrant background means that there just wasn't a lot of information out there, right? Welfare information like that was very restricted. You had to speak English. Now, less so, right? But coming from that background meant there wasn't a lot of conversations about money, right? If there wasn't
and
a lot
how
of
old
money,
were you when you came here?
Yeah, so my parents actually came. I was born here. So I was born in Brooklyn, born and raised in Brooklyn. But my parents came in their late 20s.
Okay.
Right? So they came here. Basically, they locked themselves in. They're like, we know Chinese and we don't know English, and that's it. But so, my job growing up was, a lot of translation work, mail and everything and all this other stuff. But, growing up in life, my parents did a really good job of pretending that we weren't, we were well off or good enough, right? I never really asked for anything that we couldn't get, but also helped that I didn't ask for a lot of things, right? I was a child that didn't need a lot, right? Give me money to eat lunch and I'm good to go. Which probably helped with my mindset, right, of saving money and whatnot. But growing up, avoid topic altogether. If I asked about it, how much money do you make? Right, I asked my mom or my dad, they would just dodge the question. You know how your parents would dodge and avoid questions that they didn't want to talk about? Very similar. And really, once I got to high school, I started doing internships, started making money, opened up a bank account, and started saving from there, right? But still didn't know a lot. I just put it into a savings account and stashed it away. And then really when I started thinking about college and I started getting internships and a full-time job, that's when I really had to think about what am I going to do with all this money that I'm making. And am I frozen on your screens or is it just...
You were momentarily, but it seems like it resolved itself.
Got it. Okay, cool. But yeah, in college, I think when received my first offer, right? Right outside of college, it was more money than my parents ever made. And really that sparked, a big interest, right? What am I going to do with all this money? I can't just put it into a savings account, right? And there was a lot of talks about 401ks, especially when you're coming from Baruch. I think that there is a competitive spirit. I'm sure when you went to Baruch, there was also that competitive spirit. And what a lot of my classmates and I did was we shared what our offer letters were, just because in hopes that we can negotiate, right? Try to talk, try to get a better deal. And it's hard if you're in a silo, right? If you're really competing and you're like, I don't want to tell my colleagues or my friends what I made, right? It's sort of a disservice, right? And we really should have those conversations as much as we can if people are comfortable with it, right? So that really got me thinking, what am I going to do with all this money, right? I can't just stash it away. I should invest it, right? Reading online, learning from people like Mike, right? Like people are investing their money, they're saving their money, they're making a lot of money. How can I sort of do that, right? And I think coming from an immigrant community, a lot of people always thought real estate is the path to go, right? You buy a house and you're set for life, and you might be house poor, right? You just have a house and you have no other assets, but you still have a house, right? So that's the idea coming from an immigrant community, especially if you're East Asian, right? In America, you get the house. But I live in New York City. A house in New York City, not very realistic, right? Starting out, you're going to be saving for a long time for a down payment. So really the best option was thinking about the stock market, right? That's the first thing that came to mind. And it was hard because no one knew where this information was coming from or how to get to this information. So I spent roughly 2 months after I basically got my full-time offer, just researching, right? And it was, yeah,
And just for a little bit of context too,
yeah,
Baruch is a business school.
it
So
is a business school.
and yeah, well, so it doesn't seem like things have changed very much since I went there. I don't remember getting that much in finance education either, at least
Yeah,
from the perspective of like, hey, here's you're going to be making money. Here's how you could invest it and grow for
Not
yourself.
just Baruch. Like, I went to St. John's, and I can say the same exact thing. We went out and we were basically, you're right, like, unless we had information from our families, we were basically, novices. We didn't know what to do with it initially. So yeah, I think this is
100%.
a problem across the board for when people do graduate. And especially, I was talking about money beliefs. I know you started talking about it, Alan, a little bit. What were some of those other money beliefs growing up? I know Mike had mentioned this in his mind shift guide. And when you start doing some of these exercises, again, for me too, digging deep into like, what did I grow up with? What did I feel about money? So is that something that also hindered your step in that direction to even do that research and find out more about this?
Yeah. I think a big thing was that, the community was really focused on real estate, right? And they saw the stock market in a specific way, in a negative light, right? To them, it was like it was gambling, right? They were like, it go up and go down, who knows? And that really came from the fact that they didn't understand how the stock market worked, right? And really, I did my own research for that. Luckily, I did some research I did some swing trading while I was at college with a friend. We each put in $1,000. We came out with 20% less money, but it was a good learning experience, right? At the end of the day, we checked our stocks now, and really we should just held on to those stocks and should not have cashed out. But maybe it was a streak of unluckiness because we also had a company that went bankrupt on us. So
How did you get into the swing trading part? Like that's not something that I think most people like it's their first attempt. They're going to be like, I'm going to swing trade. How can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So we had at Baruch, we had this class called Finance 3000. It was like the first class you take. And luckily for us, our professor didn't teach strictly to the textbook, right? She tried to teach stuff around it, talk about a little bit about stocks, not too deep, but that sparked our interest with my friend as well. And we were like, let's give this a shot, right? Maybe we'll be Warren Buffett, who knows, right? But you don't know until you try, right? So we'll put in a little bit, see how it goes. And obviously we started school, so we couldn't monitor the stock market all day, so we couldn't be day traders. So we decided, hey, swing trading probably the best move. So we went out with that, and it was an interesting experience. We bought Microsoft at that time. They talked a lot about like these things called HoloLens, like augmented reality, and I was like, this is it. This is where it's gonna be. It wasn't that, Microsoft eventually did not follow through with a lot of the augmented technology, and really no company did. We see in the current landscape of things, at least right now. But that was where we started, and we did not have this idea of diamond hands. I'm sure a lot of you've heard from GameStop now. We didn't have diamond hands. Like we did not hold on to these stocks for our dear life. We were scared, so we definitely sold at the wrong times, and maybe it wasn't the smartest move. But
diamond hands could get you into a lot of trouble if you as well.
It could.
Well, like I have a very similar story with how I got started. So like I first started back in '99. I was I would have been a sophomore. I would have just
right.
Yeah, about like freshman entering sophomore year in Baruch, and like I wasn't sure what I was doing at the time either. Like I went to the bank, right? Like I thought that's where you buy stocks at the bank. So I go there, and they end up putting me in mutual funds, and then my studies got busy, and I didn't end up looking at it until 2002. So 1999 was the tech bubble. Like everything was running up, and diamond hands or like oblivious diamond hands selling like or looking at it again when I graduated in 2002 after it had declined 70% didn't turn out to be such a great thing after all. So
it sounds like this is a common thing for beginners is that you got to learn the hard way sometimes.
You gotta get burned first, is what I'm seeing. Even with a lot of the books that I'm reading, like a recent book that I was reading, I told Melissa I was reading a book about day trading, and they were saying, for the first couple of months, chances are you're just gonna lose money, right? So don't bet big, figure out how much you're willing to lose. And I think Mike talked about it a little bit in his book as well, like figure out what how much you're willing to lose per trade and how much of your account you're willing to lose. And yeah, I mean, we didn't do any of that, which is kind of like, we had $1,000, we invested all 1,000, see how it went. And we did lose money, but it could have been much worse. It could have been much worse. I'm glad we didn't do anything like shorting or anything that was like infinite loss. So that was good.
The amount that you started with, that $1,000, was that an amount that you were comfortable losing, or was that like back then, like was that like, oh, this is like my life savings that I'm going in with it?
Yeah. So it was like it wasn't my life savings because I started to pay a little bit for textbooks. Those textbooks are still expensive, even more so now. But I think it was like maybe 20% of my net worth, like $1,000. Okay. So it was a big chunk. It wasn't like a small amount to me, which is probably why my friend and I exited the way that we did, just because it was a big chunk. Now not so much. Now I'm like, $1,000. I'm comfortable with seeing how that goes, just because of my full-time job. I've been working in industry for a while now, so I'm glad I'm just in that position to do that.
So Alan, how did you go from, so first you had that loss in the stock market, you graduated, you got your full-time job. So now how did you start doing this research? So how did you come up with a plan that you wanted to give back and you wanted to create this blog?
Yeah. So actually, my journey for financial literacy actually began on Reddit. There's this large subreddit, basically these forums for personal finance. And then from there, there's this nice little wiki page where you can read about everything for personal finance, right? Like stuff like college debt. Not that everything's 100% accurate, but a good starting point, right? I think that my biggest problem was I didn't know what I didn't know, right? It's like going to Google and saying, how do I know what to search if I don't know what terms to look for, right? So that was my problem. And really having that stepping stone really kicked me off. And what I also noticed is that on that forum, there were people who were posting questions like, I have this problem. How can I like sort of pay off my debt effectively? Or I have a lot of college debt. What can I do there? Or they're trying to decide between two job offers, right? So that forum sort of was representative of how much lack of financial literacy there were. And I can't imagine how much less financial literacy there were among the CUNY students who tended to be from immigrant communities, who tend to be low income, right? Because CUNY was the more affordable school, right? So thinking about that, I was like, I want to give back to my community. And also, when people found out I knew something about financial literacy, questions came my way. They're like, do you know anything about this? And I'm like, maybe. Let me do some research. And I usually just send them a link to the IRS and say, hey, it says it right there. I just gotta, just read and you're good to go. And it was just interesting that so many people lacked the knowledge and they didn't know where to look, right? So really that's where I came in and said, maybe I should try teaching webinars, right? I should start a blog, start writing something, and hopefully I can reach a lot of students. And that's where I went from there. And at the end of the day, I think once you get to a certain level of net worth, right, you might start thinking about having a financial advisor. But when you're starting out, I think having a good basis, right, knowing how to budget, right, that's a big one. A lot of students are like, budgeting, I just spend less than my paycheck and I'm good to go. And I'm like, how do you know for sure though? And they're like, the number's positive in my bank account. I'm like, okay, if you say so, right? But I think it's it's really important to talk about those things and give students an idea about where their money's going, and how to really optimize building their wealth, right? Because a lot of people talk about building wealth, but they don't give strategies or ideas or a way to start, right? Most of it's like, you have enough money, find a financial advisor, and they'll make the magic happen. But it's good to be well educated before you get to that point.
And you don't even know who to trust. Like similar to what you said, Mike, earlier, when you went to the bank thinking professionals are handling your money, then you find out 2 years later that you had even less than what you started with. So I think you're right. Knowing, having that initial education before even having somebody else manage your money, I think that's key too. Why do you think, Alan, that there is such a gap in financial education for high income versus low income families?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just that they don't know. So there's a surprising statistic that I found recently where they said, you know, I believe around 50% of the states in the United States require some form of financial literacy for high school students, right? So it's being taught somewhere, right? But the question is, what is being taught, and is it being taught in a way that's useful at the moment, right? Teaching a high school student about 401ks doesn't do anything for them. 4 years down the line, they're just going to forget about it, and they're going to be lost again. And I do think that when you come from a high income background, you have the tools and the people to ask, right? If you don't know what a 401k is, you can ask your parents, what is a 401k, right? If I don't know what a 401k is and ask my parents, they don't even know where to start from there, right? Like a 401k doesn't even make sense to them. They've never heard about it in their life. And for them, they go to their family accountant and that's it, right? That's like as far as their financial literacy extends. And a big part is also that for coming from a low income background, you have less, you worry less about building wealth and more about surviving, right? How can I pay my bills? Which is very different from how can I maximize my gains in the stock market. And you learn about how to navigate those roads. But when you start making money and that's no longer a concern, think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You get your shelter, you get your food, and then when you go above that, right, you start getting lost. You don't know what to do with your money. And for many people, it just sits in the bank account, in a savings account, just being destroyed by inflation, just because that's all they know. And the gap just comes from there's just a lack of resources, right? You're not going to people at the very moment that they need it. And the people who are wealthy, they just have to ask someone, and they're not asking Google, they're asking their family and friends.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a very interesting perspective too. So how can we get the information to the people that need it, and present it in a way where it's able to be consumed?
I think that's probably the $1 billion question, right? I've seen a lot of financial literacy apps out there where they will sort of like teach you about financial literacy, and you can get a reward if you accumulate enough points, right? Learning from those applications for financial literacy. And that's an interesting approach. And I think we have to get to the point where we can get the human touch. That's what makes financial advisors so unique. And also just answer questions, sort of simulate the environment that high income net worth individuals have when they have questions, right? I think there's a fair chunk of people who know about financial literacy and don't necessarily speak out about it or talk about it everywhere, for whatever reason, mainly because money's probably taboo, right? You don't go out there talking about money, how much you make. The more money you have, the less you talk about it, right? A fear that you get taxed, people will come after you, and so on, right? Which is how we operate as a country right now and culturally. But because of that, the people who need to know about money don't know about it because we don't talk about it, we don't chat about it. And the government has tried approaches to address this. They've created a bureau entirely around just consumer protection for and educating people about financial literacy. And that's a good place to start, especially if you don't know. I think it's called like the Financial Protection Consumer Agency or something like that, the FCPC or something like that. But ultimately, they're definitely aware. I think people are aware of the problem and they're trying to address it. But it still ends up with the same problem, right? You don't know what you don't know. You can't look for what you don't know, right? How do you make sure that you have your 401k in place? How do you make sure that you have insurance, life insurance, long-term, short-term disability insurance? Like these things just aren't spoken about. Um, and I think it's difficult to really target the people who need it the most. Especially you have to provide the information when they don't know they need it, right? Which is real tough.
Do you think that's starting to change, that money taboo, that people are becoming a little bit more open, maybe because I'm just thinking about as a college student coming out with so much debt, even more so now than when we were in college, and trying to get a job where we're in the middle of this COVID crisis. A lot of graduates can't even find a good paying job right out of school. That what is a better way, or what are things that you are teaching in your workshops to help better prepare them for their future, and to educate themselves properly when they're navigating this road?
For sure. I think a big thing is don't be afraid to ask questions, right? A lot of students are fearful. And a good example of this is when I talk to students about a high yield savings account, right? And I told them you should open up a high yield savings account instead of a savings account. And they ask questions like, are there any penalties? Will my banker know if I open up a high yield savings account? I'm afraid of doing that. And the answer to all of those is, not really, right? You should do what's best for you. You investigate this financial product, and if it works for you, it works for you. And that's a big thing. Just like the fear of asking questions, the fear of talking to people who might have more knowledge. A lot of my financial literacy came from reading, but it also came from just talking to colleagues, right? And just talking about money. And money can be awkward, and money can be awkward because if you try to have a conversation about money, there's always that weird silence. There's always that, I don't know. Or another good test, if we're getting to a world where we can talk about money, is, are you comfortable talking about how much money you make with your colleagues, right? If that's uncomfortable, then we're not getting closer to that world, and we're still far away. I think if you are a new graduate and you're talking about how much money you make, I think it's much easier because you don't have that sort of that emotional tie to it that possibly could be jealousy. It could be just like, I deserve more, or it doesn't make sense in terms of how much money they're making. And I think it's just those feelings, and also the idea that it's uncomfortable, right? Money is an uncomfortable topic, and I think we're getting better at it because people are suffering, which is not a great way to look at it, but that's probably what it is. People aren't making enough to survive the day to day. They're living on, minimum wage, and maybe that's not even enough for them. And that's where money comes in to sort of be a big topic, because you have to have the discussions about your problems to work toward a solution.
Yeah, that actually that's very similar to what we were talking about earlier. How the pain and suffering that can be a fantastic change agent, right? Like we experience all these different thoughts, feelings, emotions during this the human experience. Like that, it's all meant to serve, right? So we need to figure out what's it trying to teach us. How can we best use it? And if it is going to end up being a change agent, then yeah, it's uncomfortable now. But if we're growing into something else as a society, then maybe it's better. Maybe it's what we need.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the funny thing about financial literacy is that you can teach financial literacy to everyone, but only a segment of those people can really use it and apply it, right? And I've encountered this a few times where, a student who has a different career path reached out to me. They have a career path in sort of theater, right? Obviously, the income isn't as stable as if you worked in finance or if you worked in technology, right? And they were asking, how can I set myself up for the future, right? And their challenge there isn't that they don't know about an IRA or a 401k, right? Their challenge there is, can they make enough money to cover all of their expenses plus health insurance? And that's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? That's where financial literacy isn't as useful per se in terms of wealth building, but sort of just staying afloat. I think it's that's a tough part, and that's really like, I think for those students and those recent graduates, they have it really tough, because no amount of me telling them how they can optimize their money is gonna ensure that they can use their money, because they don't have enough money. At the end of the day, if they don't have enough money, there's not much that can be done there unless they find alternative means of generating income.
So,
Right?
so is that where the budgeting component comes in?
That, I think that is where the budgeting component comes in. And it's interesting how it applies, right? Some people, if you don't make enough for rent in New York City, you don't make enough. You have to relocate, and I think it's where you have the hard conversations, right? When it really comes down to it. Otherwise, I think the people who are making a lot of money and are just blowing it, they need the help, and they know it, and there's some of that can be done for it in terms of like they could just budget. Right?
I think this is a great example of what we just encountered this past year during this pandemic, where there were people who everybody thought had it made, or had like the fancy cars and the houses, and now if they were just living paycheck to paycheck, or they weren't budgeting, or they were living beyond their means, one person loses their job and now they can't afford food, and like some of these people would have to go to food drives that they never did before, and you just see this huge divide across the country of how are people actually surviving? Is it this paycheck to paycheck mentality? And how do we fix that? Where, like you said, Alan, like there is this education out there that can help people, whatever your paycheck or how you are earning a living. For theater people, they're following their passion is what they love to do. But how can they make it work in this, in living in New York City or living in a particular environment? Or if they do lose their job, how do they still survive and make, and the Maslow's pyramid, how do they still stay afloat?
Yeah, definitely. That's the tough conversations, right? Because we're seeing record people in food banks nowadays. And really, if you don't come from a blue collar background that allows you to work from home right now, you're probably suffering, which is difficult, right? Because at this point, they've reached the point of they didn't have an emergency fund. They didn't have insurance of any kind to cover for a job loss, right? Aside from unemployment, and they can keep claiming that as long as the government can pass any measures that they need, right? So that's also not great to hope that the government has your back throughout all of this. You want to be fully prepared yourself. And I think for those people, it might be a lesson, as Mike was talking about before, about like the pain, right? They'll have to learn from this, and hopefully, they're in a good place that they can save. Because we should acknowledge that there are people who just can't save, like not because they're not budgeting. It's probably because they don't make enough, right? At the end of the day, their paycheck comes, it goes, and they fed their family and paid rent, and that's it. Right, and there's nothing more, that's really tough, because that plays into just generational wealth building. And if you're stuck at the bottom of the wealth building ladder, it's hard to climb up, right? It's hard to climb up without the right mentality and without the right opportunities.
Alan, if you could give those people like 2 or 3 key bits of advice or wisdom, what would that be? Or if they've dug themselves into this hole, or how can they start digging themselves out?
Yeah, I would say it's tough. I can take it. I don't know if I have a good set of advice for them, but I could say what my parents thought when they were at this whole. They really bet everything on their children, right? To escape this generational cycle, right? Because a lot of people, they might be working the same job every generation of their family for decades, for generations, and they're just, they're fine there. And there's not much that can be done there, right? If people are satisfied with that, except when a crisis hit, you can't do much there. But my parents really pushed their children to step out of that, right? Take a blue collar job, learn a skill that's part of that can play into the future, right? And try to navigate that as best as you can, and make enough income to sort of, have freedom, right? Have financial independence to pursue that. And I think that another thing to think about is, I think it's all right to admit if you don't know financial literacy, if you don't know enough, right? Because you have to seek help outside of the family, right? And outside of your environment, right? Especially if you come from a low income environment, people just won't know. Like it's not knowledge that's taught, and people need to seek knowledge outside, right? And that can come in many forms. Um, and really, the last thing here is just really thinking about what you want, right? Either for you or for your family, right? And if you don't want to have financial independence, then that's not something you can work toward, right? I think it's very similar to the values that Mike was talking about in his book, right? Really understanding what your money beliefs are, and if you're willing to change them, and if you're not, that's a tough ball to play, right? Then you really have to accept where you're coming from, and if you don't want to change, then that's it, right? But I think you really have to drive yourself to make improvements, and it's probably scary, right? It's probably strange. You're going to this new land, no idea what's happening, but that's part of improving, right?
This conversation is so perfect, because we were just talking about this book by Carol Dweck. It's called Mindset: The New Psychology of Success, and it talks about that fixed mindset where you think unless you have the natural born talent, like this is static, nothing's going to change, versus the growth mindset where you can continue to develop those skills and continue to learn and to reach your full potential. I think that's great, Alan, where you had to change those money beliefs that you were born with, and being able to say, like, no, I can develop these skills. I can now teach them, which you are doing at Baruch, which is phenomenal. Can you talk about some of the workshops that you are teaching there, or some of the topics you guys are reviewing?
For sure. I think a big topic that I talk about is investing, right? I'm a big fan of passive investing, right? I don't swing trade anymore. And maybe I will starting again soon.
Yeah, Mike, hint, hint.
but I am really focused on passive investing, and I think that fits the mold for a lot of people, right? Because
and how are
passive
you
investing,
and how are you doing that? Well, like, what's your definition of passive investing?
Yeah, for me, passive investing is I try to give a financial goal to it, and that's retirement. Right? Everyone needs to retire. No one's gonna sit there and be like, "I'm never gonna retire," because your health and your ability, physical ability to do something is eventually going to deteriorate. You have to retire at some point. So everyone can agree on their sole goal: I need to retire. Right? So it's relatable. Everyone understands that. And usually, what I do is, I try to pick a mutual fund that works for retirement. A lot of the ones that are designed for retirement are the age-based mutual funds. And I try to, say, hey, this 2060 mutual fund, if you retire around 2060, this can work for you. And I just talk about, like, how much you can expect in returns on average for the stock market, and what that looks like over a 40-year period, right? For a lot of these people in their 20s, they don't have context for what is compound returns, or what is, how much money they can make over that period just by putting a little bit in every month, right? So just talking to them about that and how they can set themselves up for the future really plays a big part into my workshops, because it's really, most of it is long term, right? The short term workshops about budgeting, it's very applicable to them. They're like, hey, what's my income? What's my expense? Just gotta keep a record of everything, and then you want to analyze it and make sure that you're saving enough, right, when it comes down to it. But other topics I talk about is credit cards. You'd be surprised how many students don't have credit cards from CUNYs. They're not too familiar, right? Most of them are like, how do I open up a credit card, right? What if I never had credit before, right? Do I go about opening up a secured credit card? Like, what are my options? And they're always wondering. Funny enough, one of the biggest things, the barriers to them opening up a credit card is actually what's the best credit card? And they try to research the best credit card before they open it. And I always tell them, you can worry about the best credit card when you have good credit, and you don't have to, credit card companies aren't going to tell you no, right?
Mm.
Then you can worry about the best credit card. Right now, what you want to do is just open up a credit card, if it has no fees, pay it off all the time, and make sure that you build credit over time, right? And that's like the big thing for them. And a lot of students are, they're like, can I trust myself with a credit card? I'm like, I think you can trust yourself with a credit card if
I
you
still trust
are
myself with a credit
responsible.
card.
I don't trust you with a credit card.
Shopping spree. Okay.
But yeah, so topics like that, it's like basic financial literacy. I'm not hitting them with, do you need life insurance, or stuff that they aren't too familiar with or can't act upon, right? I wanna give them actionable things at the very end of the workshop.
And are you starting at the freshman level, or is this more like when they're like junior or seniors, or could be at any of the different levels?
Yeah, so I teach two cohorts of workshops. Usually it's recent alumni, and these are people who graduated the past like 2 or 3 years. And then I have just student workshops, and there's just anyone, right? Anyone wants to come. I see a good mixture. Like there's seniors, freshmen, and juniors, right? They're all over the place. Not really a single area or a single year versus others. But the funny thing is that a lot of people from many majors come, and there's always a few students who took finance, and they're like, I know all about stock market investing, and they come in, and I'm like, oh, it's great to have you, and then they try to talk about how they're doing the stock market, and it's very interesting to see how much knowledge they can share and generate in the chat room and with like other students. So I do appreciate that as well.
Mm. I heard that you're developing a financial literacy software tool. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So right now I'm sort of touching a few areas in terms of like software I'm developing, right? So I try to tailor it to the workshops that I'm working on, right? So if I have a tool for retirement, then I build a calculator for retirement, right? Like, how much can they put in their 401k? What does the match look like? And then over a period of time, what that looks like for students. And I share that out, and then students can try it out and just see what that looks like. Because at the end of the day, when I put up these numbers on my slide, it's really numbers I cherry picked, right? And they're accurate more or less, right? You invest for 40 years over a period of time, and you invest like $500 and you become a millionaire, right? So those numbers are more or less accurate. But I want students to play with the numbers themselves, right? So then, what if they want to retire earlier, or what if they put less in or more, right? How much can they retire with then? So software like that is what I try to build, and I'm really thinking about. Ultimately, I want to build something that sort of answers questions as people need them, right? So think about like Google, except you know what to look for whenever you need it the most, right? So that's always tough, because you have to build software that's all encompassing and at the same time very specific for the person's needs, right? So that's the challenge that I'm facing.
So is it going to suggest things based on like what they're like? It's not a search engine. It's like giving recommendations. Am I thinking of this right?
Yeah, so ultimately I want to build a software that can sort of provide recommendations with the pros and cons. Or another way to think about it is it can be your financial advisor on a very light level, right? It can never really replace a financial advisor, right? Because your financial advisor is watching the markets, making sure your money is safe. So it can't do that. But maybe if you had X amount of money in your bank account and you have enough for an emergency fund, maybe it'll suggest to you, hey, you should invest this extra money, right? Either in the stock market, either in purchasing a home, or somewhere, right? Anywhere that doesn't lose value to inflation, right? And then it can sort of paint these models for you, right? What if you just leave it there? How much money would it be worth versus if you invested it? So sort of like provide insight rather than, and help you make decisions rather than make those decisions for you.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, how is this like in a beta phase, or like how far along are you with development?
Yeah. So I'm still working on writing the code for it. So it's gonna
Okay.
take a while, depending on where it goes. I think my challenge is it's difficult to ingest user data in a friendly manner that doesn't cause issues when it comes to privacy and data protection, right? So I'm thinking about that. But obviously, there's ways to get around this, right? You could just tell users to put in their own data and provide recommendations as such. So we'll see. But I'm hoping to share it, some point either later this year or early next year, right? So
Are you going to roll it out with Baruch students first and see how that
yeah,
goes?
yeah, I think like you're rolling out a beta to let them test it out to make sure that the design works for them. Because clearly there's a need. The real question at the end of the day is, does my software solve that need, or is it just uh, more confusion that's added to the really confusing landscape of financial literacy. But ideally, I want to be the bridge between when they graduate and before they get a financial advisor, right? That bridge and helping them understand these basic concepts and really help them make decisions for the long term so that they can grow their wealth to justify having someone manage their money for them.
I think it sounds incredible, Alan. Really, what a journey you're on. Seriously, what you're doing to help these young students and young alumni better navigate the world. This is great.
Are there any final thoughts that you have for people that are either in high school, colleges, that are getting ready to begin their financial future?
Yeah. So that's a lot of segments that you mentioned there. So I'll go through each of them.
Okay.
I think high school is interesting. If you're in high school, the probably biggest thing when it comes to financial literacy is college debt. Where
Okay.
college debt is not going away. We like to think that Biden is going to eradicate college debt. It may or may not happen. I wouldn't say, hey, Biden's going to 100% eradicate college debt. Let me take on 200K in loans. Don't do that because we don't know if it's going to happen or not. And I think the wisest choice there is to, college is a time to experiment. And I think when you want to experiment in an affordable manner, right? Like when you build companies, you want to build lowest cost as possible to test out the idea, right? So if you're talking about building a career, test it out, right? And one of the most affordable ways to test it out is going just to a community college, right? Try out the major, right? See if you like it or if it's cheap. And you can just go to build the credits, right? The minimum credits that you need to graduate and then transfer to a better college, right? If you really are pursuing that one major, that one career. And I would say, I hate to say this, but try to pick a major that makes enough money to pay back the college degree, right? I'm not saying I don't have a bias against one major versus another major, but if you are not confident that you can pay back your college debt with this degree, don't do it, right? Because it's not going to be a financially smart move, and college debt really does drag you down, and it's a bad trade-off, right, financially. So try to make the smart decision. At the end of the day, it's going to be your call, but you have to at least consider it, right, and map out models to figure out how long it's going to take for me to pay this off if I choose to take this career that is lower paying but higher college debt, right? So that's something to consider when it comes to high school students. I think once you're in college, I think that's a time to experiment, right? Watch some of Mike's videos and go spend some money to invest in the stock market. And if you make money, great. If you don't make money, that's fine too, because you learned, right? I think at the end of the day, you learn, and it's a good time to learn when you don't have a lot to lose as a college student, right? If you have a lot to lose, that's not the time to learn, right? That's the time to apply information that you already know to generate as much wealth as you can, right? Or at least if you're going to learn, you should limit your pool of resources to learning before throwing everything and going all into different investments. So stuff like that, making sure that you try your best to learn and have access to resources, because there's a lot of free resources online, right? Just across the board, there's a lot of free resources, and more. It's having the motivation to research and to look, right? Because these questions may only come up once or twice a year, but when you're out of college and you're growing your wealth, it's going to come up more often, right? And it's something that you should definitely just do your research and learn about financial literacy. Open up a credit card. That's another big thing. Build your credit early on. We live in a country where you need credit to rent, you need credit to buy a home, right? So without credit, you're stuck, right? You basically have nowhere to live unless someone co-signs for you. So be sure to open up a credit card while you still are young, so you have time to build that credit. But otherwise, I think those are the basics. I feel like you have something to say, Mike.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that that's all super helpful advice. Advice that I wish that I had somebody giving me when I was graduating high school and getting ready to graduate college. So I think that it's fantastic the work that you're doing here and helping to educate people. Well done.
I appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing everything else that you do with your blog, with your software, and can you tell us well, what are some of the best ways to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I think the best way, if you're curious to just ask me questions or reach out, you can do so via the blog at tomoonfund.com, or just email me at alan.tomoon@gmail.com. I'm sure Mike and Melissa can put that into the description below. But otherwise, I'm always happy to chat. I'm always happy to talk about financial literacy, about how I can help you or help anyone out there learn more about financial literacy. I may not know everything, but I know how to Google really well. So, and I know who to ask. So hopefully that's a good step, first step for anyone who's in a confusing position when it comes to their finances.
Absolutely. All right, Alan. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great rest of the day.
Can't wait to see what more exciting things are. Yeah, you have in store for us. So we have to have you on the show again once the software tool's ready to go.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I do appreciate it. And good luck with Mara Wealth. I'm sure it's growing like crazy. And if you haven't read Mike's book, read Mike's book. It was great for me.
The
Trader's
I really
Mind Check
Guide.
Guide.
The check is in the mail. Awesome, man. Thanks again, and look forward to talking to you again real soon.
For sure. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Wow, that's so crazy. I can't believe that there's still such a huge gap in financial education in colleges as well as high schools across the country.
Yeah, I know. I guess some things never change.
I still remember my financial education class in my alma mater that we had to bring in a newspaper and see if the stock went up or down. Like, that was like the extent of my stock knowledge.
Yep, pretty much the same thing back in the day when we had like stone tablets. We had to bring them into to school. That was basically it. Like, well, which way do you think the price is going to move, up or down, and state your reason why. And that's that's one of the reasons why I guess when I first started, I thought that that's all you needed to do. And here we are.
But yeah, it's crazy to see that, even like basic things like some college students not even owning a credit card. I think that was mind-boggling, is that you need credit history in order to even get a mortgage and to build up your credit score, to get other things to build financial independence.
Yeah, I think that it's really on us to develop financial education, the type of financial education that's going to have practical use. Things like not just trading, but like for budgeting, for building credit history, all those kinds of things. People need to be taught this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's so great that people like you and now people like Alan are doing that. That Baruch is, helping to bridge that gap by offering these type of workshops for students as well as for alumni. So hopefully other colleges will learn from their example.
Although I think that that's one good thing too, right? If the universities are open to bringing in other people and sharing this kind of education with students, I think that that's a good step in the right direction.
I agree. And for more educational content just like this show, please be sure to subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you for our next one.
Yes, we hope that this gave you the jumpstart you needed. Now take it and run with it.
Bye.